We all can give reasons why we're not where we want to be. We can give external descriptions. We can talk about our past. But the only reason someone doesn't just take their life and do something to change it, the only real reason, fear. F-E-A-R. What does it stand for? We've all heard those acronyms, false evidence that appears real. We're falsely responding to something and making it so real we're scared. I think F-E-A-R stands for F everything and run. Because when you're really scared, what do? You want to run, baby, right? It's called fight or flight. You either want to battle it out because you've got that adrenaline because you're scared. Some people, when they're scared, they get angry. Or you want to bust out of here, right? So if you and I are going to have a better quality of life, no matter what happens to us in our lives, if we're going to be more than the moment, then some part of us has got to learn how to deal with fear in a different way. And so in this episode with Mandy and Scott and Rita, we found that this couple is the beginning of the story. We find that, wow, their entire life is being controlled by this fear that Mandy's living with. And she seems to have a good reason for it. And the reason is her daughter, if you watch the episode, gets in this go-kart before her mom can get in. She slams on the accelerator. She goes full speed in the back of a truck. And even though she's wearing a helmet, the impact is so intense, it cracks the helmet. It knocks her out. She's not breathing. And Mandy's a medical assistant, and she goes, and she cannot revive her. She dies on the spot, or so it seems. Within a few moments, they actually revive her. She's had that experience, and some people talked about where they've been out with no breath, no pulse, nothing, and she comes back. The medical people that get there are able to turn her around, but it's after a long period of time, and the only permanent damage is to her daughter's hearing. Otherwise, she recovers completely. Rather, though, than being excited that, oh my God, we survived this, my daughter's okay, Mandy becomes traumatized. She has post-traumatic syndrome, she has panic attacks. And what's a panic attack? It's now anything that leads to something that reminds me of what happened in the past, where I felt like I was gonna die, where I felt like the worst thing possible could happen. Now I overreact. I go into fight or flight even quicker. And Mandy is doing it, and it seems to be destroying their relationship, because fear destroys everything, by the way. Fear will murder your love. Fear will murder adventure. Fear will murder your life. I'm here to tell you right now, every one of us has fear, but if you want to live, fear's got to die. And the way you do it is so damn simple, but let's just first, for a moment, be sure what we're really afraid of. See, when I first saw this episode, I felt deeply for this family, and I almost didn't go to work with them because I said, I want to work with somebody whose child actually did die and show people how to get through that, because it's such a horrific situation. So many people have been through the real loss. Why deal with this woman when, after all, she has the good fortune of having her child? And then I reconsidered, because I thought, how many of us are controlled by something that happened a long time ago and it's over? We're here, we're okay. And yet we let some memory from the past or some perception of the past control our present and control our future. Haven't you done that somewhere? Think about it. Isn't there something that once happened? You got rejected. You were trying to go for a job and you get through so many rejections, or you gave your all and then somebody hurt you. And so now you never open up again. What is it that's happened in your past that's controlling your present and future? It's not the event that's controlling you. It's the fear of going through those feelings again. That feeling of feeling like a failure, or being rejected, or feeling alone. Some people stay in a relationship when they're miserable. Have you ever done this before, at least in your past? You ever been in a relationship where you knew it wasn't right? It wasn't right for you, it wasn't right for them, but you stayed just because you were scared of being alone? Or scared of how to deal with the stress of confronting the situation? Most people have settled for a life that is so far less than what they deserve and what they desire and what they're capable of, primarily because of this thing called fear. And we don't usually call it that, we call it stress. Because achievers, we achievers, we don't get fearful, right? We just get stressed. Well, why are you doing it? I have to do it. Why? Because I just have to. Well, what if you don't do it? But I have to do it. But what if you don't? Well, then it'll fall apart. What if it falls apart? Well, then it'll fail. What if it fails? Then I'll be a failure. See, if you follow kind of the trail of stress with any human being, it'll lead you to their fear. Whatever you're stressed about at some level, you believe that if this thing isn't handled, I'm going to meet my ultimate fear. Yes, everybody has the fear of success or the fear of failure at times, or the fear of rejection or the fear of the unknown or the fear of falling. right? Or the fear of humiliation, the fear of pain, but all the different fears human beings have that affect them. In my experience now of working with 4 million people from 100 countries in the world, from the most successful people to the most challenged, everybody has 2 primary fears. It's like all roads lead to Rome. Fear number 1 is we're all afraid at some level that we're not enough. Again, not strong enough, not smart enough, not rich enough, not pretty enough, not athletic enough, not playful enough, not funny enough, not authentic enough, not strong enough. I don't know. Everybody's got something. Haven't you had a time in your life when you felt like, oh my God, I'm not enough for someone that matters or something that matters? If you're honest, you know the answer is yes. And even if you're doing great right now, this fear doesn't go away. It shows up again at some stage in your life. There'll be some stage when you won't feel like you're enough, and it's one of the sickest feelings human beings can feel inside. You feel like nothing, like worthless. And to feel like you're not enough, to feel worthless, as bad as that is, that leads to the second deeper fear, which is we all fear that if I'm not enough, I won't be loved. Why? Well, first of all, love is oxygen to the human soul, isn't it? I mean, even people say they don't want it. We all want some form of that connection, that depth. We crave it. When babies are born, if they're not physically loved, if they're not held, touched, if they don't have that kinesthetic connection, they can die. In fact, they develop something called failure to thrive syndrome. Any doctor can tell you what it is. They can't explain how it works. They just know that if babies don't get that physical touch and love, they literally die. That's how important it is to human beings. And yet most of us are so scared of love because we're afraid, not we're scared of love, we're afraid it'll be taken away. We're afraid to have our hopes brought up. We're afraid to be in a place where we could feel that sense of excitement and aliveness and have it be dashed. So lots of people, out of their fear of the loss of that love, try to mitigate, try to lower their expectations for their life, for their business, for their relationship. But lowering your expectations doesn't make you feel more alive. It just tries to make you feel a little less pain, a little more numb. And that's not an answer for a life that's filled with breakthroughs and love and joy and passion and all the things I know you'd want. And I'm sure you've done the same. I'm sure you've done something so many times that one day you went, no more. That's the breakthrough moment. And that breakthrough moment is when you confront the fear, where you do it in spite of the fear, where you stop telling yourself a story about why you can't do it. You don't have the time, you don't have the energy, you don't have the money, easy for other people. We've all got a story about why we're not where we want to be, because you have 2 choices. Either face your fear that says, oh my God, maybe I'm not strong enough, smart enough, committed enough, determined enough to do this, and I'm not enough and I won't be loved, or I got a story about how it's not my fault, how something in the environment happened, about something in my past, about, I'm gonna do it in the future. You have either results or you have a story. Because most of us, we don't want to face that fear. But you know what's amazing? We have this fear we're not enough, but human beings, when they put everything on the line, they can usually pull off just about anything they're committed to. Not everything. You don't always get what you want. You don't always achieve your goals or your dreams. But sometimes you don't get your goal or dream, but you get something better. Like, you don't get what you want, but you, in pursuing that goal or dream, become something more than you ever dreamed of. You develop that courage or that determination or that compassion or that playfulness or the faith that somehow in other parts of your life, when it's needed, it's there. It's like an emotional muscle. When other people pull back and everybody's like, oh, I don't know what to do, you just like move, I'll handle it. Because you've faced so many things, you've gotten in the face of fear so many times that it's something you know, and it's something you know you can handle. It doesn't mean it doesn't grab you, it doesn't scare you, it doesn't make you want to fight or flight, run or fight. It doesn't mean it doesn't show up, it just, you don't let it run your life. Fear for most people is like going into court and only having the prosecution give their case. They tell you all the reasons why it can't happen, and if you buy it, if you don't listen to someone who stands up and defends and says, here's why we should do this, pretty soon your mind takes over. And the deep part of our mind is so fearful because it's trying to protect us. It's trying to make sure we can survive. So it takes more than just the animal part of you to achieve the level that you want to achieve in your life of joy and fulfillment and accomplishment. Your contribution to your family, your society, if it's going to be significant, something meaningful, then some part of you is going to have to face those fears again and again. And when I say murder fear, for you to live, you got to kill the fear. The way you murder fear is only one way: pure action, massive action. There's no rocket science here. You know it and I know it. But we try to prepare ourselves. And don't get me wrong, I mean, if you're gonna take on something new, you should figure out what you're doing, have the right plan, right strategy, but ultimately you just gotta do stuff to figure it out. The only way you're gonna get over the fear and get across that room to that man or woman is just go do it so many times that fear becomes somebody you know. And pretty soon it's not fear, you're confident, you know. It's not an unknown anymore. How do we do this with this couple? Well, I knew from the very beginning, I know a series of techniques, I'm teaching to anyone. I've done them for years. I wiped out lifetime phobias literally in 15 minutes to an hour. There's a series of tools, anyone can learn to do that. I got famous early in my career by challenging traditional psychologists and psychiatrists and saying, give me your toughest patient, give me 1 hour or less and I'll wipe out their challenge. I don't care if you've been dealing with them for years. I don't care if they have uncontrollable phobias. My career started in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and I got on a radio show and challenged traditional psychiatrists who said they couldn't do this. And I started with a woman with a snake phobia, and literally at the end I wrapped this snake around this woman, and the doctor was freaking out. I did it in a public forum, and then that became my signature. I would go out and challenge people. Now today, with my partner Chloe Madonis, we've trained over 100,000 therapists around the world. So it's not a new technique, and I'm no longer, some dumb kid just trying to challenge somebody. I'm showing people what I've learned and what other people have learned about how to create change quickly. So we can get over any fear if we learn how to change our conditioning. If we learn how to get ourselves to do it, and we learn how to kind of condition our mind. Realize that very often what you think you're afraid of, the fear is something maybe a little deeper and should be dealt with clearly. When Mandy and Scott, when they first put this out, I thought, okay, this woman has a phobia. I know how to wipe that out. That's 10 minutes of a show, maybe 15. I'm not trying to sound crazy or be exaggerating, but it's true. Maybe it'll take a half hour, but no one's gonna want to sit and watch that. What's really going on here though with this couple? I saw the upsets, the anger, the frustration between the parents. And I understood that obviously Scott would feel if his wife doesn't trust him to take his kids outside, that would start to frustrate him. But obviously, behind this fear was something else that also had to be dealt with. Do you remember I said in a previous week, I said, look, you can look at the surface problem and find something to blame. This happened because their child smashed into the back and almost died. The phobia, or the panic attacks definitely would come from that. But for her to stay locked in that state, there must be something else going on. I really believe that when it comes to real communication comes from hearing what's not being said. It's listening for the unspokens, and especially between men and women. Because men and women, it's a gross generalization, but a masculine brain tends to communicate in a different way. And I don't just mean men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Obviously, some men are very feminine, some women are very masculine, but that energy, that masculine energy, tends to be more direct in its communication. If I say to one of my buddies, hey, you want to get together on Saturday, you got time? And he says, no, I'm busy. I just know he's busy. But if you say to a feminine woman, hey, she says, can we get together on Saturday? And you say, no, I'm busy. Then she has to go decide what that means. Is he saying that he doesn't find me attractive? Is he saying that he no longer loves me? Is he out messing around with 12 other women? No, he's just busy on Saturday. I'll just give you that communication. The reason women look at it differently is women have an indirect style of communication. I didn't realize in the early days of being with my wife that we'd be driving and she'd say, honey, do you need to stop to use the restroom, or do you need to stop to get a drink? I'd say, no, honey, I'm fine. And then I get this tightness beside me as time went by, and I didn't know what was bothering her. See, in the feminine world, you don't just say what you want. If you're a feminine woman, you communicate indirectly. By saying, did I want a drink or to stop at the restroom, she was really saying, why don't you connect with me right now and see what I need, what I want. By my just saying, I don't want it, like answering like a normal man would be, she was upset thinking, I don't care how she feels, because I didn't turn to her and say, do you want to stop for you? I thought if she wanted to stop, she'd just say, honey, I need to stop. That's how men think. And so Scott's hearing his wife talking about how, he isn't doing this, he isn't doing that. He's not listening for what she's really saying to him, which is, please come show me that you're present for me. Please come tell me what I've been through is tough. Please affirm me. Because women affirm each other. He wasn't hearing the real communication. He just saw his wife's fear. He didn't realize that what I'm really afraid of, Scott, is that, do you still love me? Will you be here for me even if I'm crazy? Do you love all of me? And so in the beginning, he thought she didn't love him anymore and this relationship was ending, which was killing him inside. He felt he didn't know what to do because he thought all this was about something outside his control. And he felt his wife blamed him. But she said he was responsible for this, even though, frankly, as Mandy would tell you today, her daughter was getting inside the go-kart beside her. But under the fear, under the stress, under the fear that not only my daughter might die, but maybe I contributed to it because I didn't act quickly enough, she blamed herself. And when she was done blaming herself, she blamed Scott. So Scott took all this literally. Instead of hearing what Mandy really is scared. She's scared she's not enough. She wasn't a good enough mother. She sure is, but she felt like she wasn't, that she's not a good enough wife. And the more Scott pulled away from her, the more scared she got. So if you really dig in with human beings, the deep fear is that I'm not enough and I won't be loved. If you can heal that fear, you can heal everything else, phobias, panic attacks, and everything else. And sometimes you have to deal with a specific situation also, which I did do. But I didn't want to just look for the surface problem. I want to look for the deeper problem. The deeper problem in this relationship was the fear that these two people really weren't enough for each other. And then Mom shows up, and when Rita showed up, she had her own fears. Her own fears that her daughter might leave her. And so very often, sometimes in relationships, you end up with this triangle where when two people get closer together, someone else gets further away. And so what happens is when her daughter got closer to her now son-in-law, she was further away. If her daughter was closer to her, then the son-in-law was further away, if you get the sense of what I'm trying to show you with a triangle with my hands. What happens is, very often in life, a mother or a father who is loved so deeply can interfere with a core relationship. And it's just their own fear, their fear of losing their child. Once you find something you fear more than what's stopping you, like maybe you're afraid of rejection, but you're more afraid of living a life that disgusts you, living a life where you have to settle. Maybe you're afraid of being alone, but maybe you're more afraid of being with some human being that is totally abusive to you. And so you finally make that click and change. One way to get rid of fear is to find something you fear more that'll motivate you to move. But ultimately, the fastest and easiest way to deal with fear is not rocket science. Once again, it's something you know, it's just do it. And sometimes maybe a friend can help you to do that. And sometimes it's just hitting that breakthrough moment where you're frustrated enough, mad enough, clear enough, or just maybe it's a moment. You get inspired enough, you say, I'm doing this, and you don't think, you just make yourself do the thing you're afraid of. Because doing what you're afraid of is the death of fear. How do we finally get over fear? The ultimate conquering of fear is when you realize what fear really is. It's just an energy. It's an energy that you're not familiar with enough, and so the unknown of it starts to take you over. Or it's an energy that you've given a label to. The label starts to take control of you. I'll give you an interesting example. When I was growing up and I was just a young kid, I loved Bruce Springsteen music. I loved, Born to Run and all those types of songs. And I remember very vividly the first time I had the chance to actually meet him in person. I was getting on a plane, a semi-private plane. It was somebody's big private plane. They'd thrown this party and they were taking people from New York, from California to New York, from LA to New York. And they're at a bar on the plane. And so I got a chance to go up and meet Bruce Springsteen. I was just a young kid and shook his hand and got to ask him some questions. And I said, listen, I don't know if you ever heard of what I do. I'm this young guy, but I do these seminars. And I said, I just love the energy of it. I'm so committed. And every time I get up, I get myself in state. And I said, I'd like to know. I said, do you get scared in front of a big crowd? Or is it boring to you at all? Or do you still get wired? I mean, what's it really like? And he began to describe to me exactly what it was like. And I listened to every word he said. What was fascinating to me is what he said and what I heard sometime later from someone who was very scared, someone who was having panic attacks. Here's what Bruce Springsteen said to me. He said, no, I still love it. Are you kidding me? He said, I live for it. And he said, when I'm backstage, he said, I do feel a change. He said, I forget what he called it, the warm-up band or whatever it was. When you hear them out there and you hear those first cheers, he said, there's like an energy that starts to get in my body. He says, I kind of like to speed up just a little bit. My body starts to speed up. And he said, I forget the exact words, but he said, I start to feel like this energy in my arms and my hands, and my heart starts to beat faster, and I got the little tension in my body. And he said, and then the energy just really starts to get strong. I start to get a little bit of sweat, and he said, right then I know I'm ready. So So I thought, wow, that's really cool. And it kind of just stuck in my head, obviously. And I thought, how do I relate to that? And how do I get ready? But I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years later, I hear this famous person, and to give them their privacy, I won't mention their name, but they're saying they can't get on stage. And the reason they can't get on stage is something's happened to them and they're having panic attacks. And so finally I got a chance to intervene and have this communication, and I said, well, describe to me what happens and why you can't get on stage. And this particular person said, well, what happens is and they didn't use the exact words, but it was like when the band's warming them up, I hear the music in the background, I hear some of the voices, or I hear the cheers or the clapping, and I get this tension in my body, this tension that starts to increase, energy. And the tension starts to increase, and I feel it building, and as time goes by, my heart starts beating faster, and then pretty soon I feel that tension in my arms and my hands, and I start to sweat, and then all of a sudden I quit because I know I'm having a panic attack. What's the difference between a panic attack and getting ready? A few words, and once we change the words, once we call it a panic attack, all of a sudden that meaning takes us over. See, one of the great lessons, if you watch this show, was you watched a woman transform, and she went through some kind of weird and ugly places to deal with it. We all have to deal with those parts of ourselves where when we're afraid, we fight, and it doesn't look so good, or we flight, we run away. And you watch Mandy do that, but because she kept going through fear after fear after fear, and we made her do it, and to her credit, she did do it, she started to get some new experiences, and she didn't need a belief about what it was going to be like. She had some experiences. But the most important thing is when we got on that final rafting trip, when all of a sudden there was a point when she'd experienced so much of this energy that all of a sudden her brain went, this is actually exciting. This energy, it's not fear, it's excitement. They're pretty close, because when I'm excited, I'm a little afraid, but I just decided I'm enjoying this. And if I just make that little shift, where all of a sudden I say, you know what, I want some of this fear, it makes me feel alive. All of a sudden then fear becomes an energy you dance with, instead of something that drugs you, that stops you, now it's something that delights you. And so I'm not saying that fear doesn't still grab me by the guts at times and speed me all up, but when all that happens, there's a part of me that goes, I'm ready, right? I'm getting ready, my nervous system's getting ready, it's time to rock and roll, because the meaning is still within your power. You can ask yourself some of the questions you learned in the earlier week when you're being afraid, like, is it true? What does this make me feel? What if I didn't feel this thought, that I had to be a certain way? Would I be afraid? You can do so many different things that we've taught you here, or if you go to our courses, like we teach people how to storm through a fire, and it's not about firewalking, it's about facing the fire of your life, anything that stops you. And we show you how to change your state in a moment, physically, mentally, and do what you're afraid of. There are some simple techniques you can learn, but you don't have to learn anything if you just make yourself do it, if you just step up. So death of fear is obviously absolute when you just make yourself do the thing you're afraid of, and so that's what this week's about. Your breakthrough this week's really simple, really easy. All you gotta do this week is say, okay, what am I afraid of? What's the fear that's holding me back? And be totally honest with yourself. Step 2, you gotta write down, what do you fear more than that fear? Like, I'm afraid of, I don't know, I'm afraid of relationship, but God, I'm more afraid of being alone. I'm afraid of skydiving, but I'm more afraid of not facing and conquering myself, because I know inside, I know I'm more than how I'm living, whatever it is. And the third thing is, what's your action plan? What's something you never want to do, but you're going to do it this week, because this week you're in the midst of breakthroughs and you're just going to do it. You're going to book that flight, you're going to go to that class, you're going to go to that course, you're going to come up to that person where they say yes, no, or not, you're going to express it, you're going to call on that client. What is it? You're going to tell the truth in this relationship and resolve it one way or the other? Because as long as fear exists, we're held back. The breakthrough happens when you face the fear and you do it anyway, and this is the week to do it. Why? Because you chose to. Because you have the power to just decide and do it. I could give you a ton of techniques with more time. We don't need techniques right now. We just need you to step up and do what you know is right. So do us a favor. Make a commitment. Decide what the fears you're going to face. Why are you going to face it? Why is it worth facing? Why do you got to conquer it? Why will you conquer it? What do you fear more, or why is now finally the time? Give yourself enough reasons, because reasons come first and answers come second. If you get enough reasons to conquer the fear, you'll do it. And thirdly, what are you going to do to conquer it? What are you going to do to face it? Conquering it doesn't mean you don't feel it again in the future. It just means you know you can handle it because you've handled it before. What are you going to do? And then When are you going to do it? And what I'd like you to do is go on to Facebook or go in the comments here and make a commitment, make a public commitment, and then come back and tell us you did it and tell us what it means to you. Sound like fun? Well, fear doesn't sound like fun until you've done enough times, and after a while, it's just a little bit of excitement. So my message this week is real simple. Break through by dancing with your fear. You're never going to get rid of it. Use it as an energy and move yourself forward. This is the week. This is the time. Well, maybe even today's the day. Nothing real is ever lost. And I thought the best way to do that was to demonstrate it with a family that was experiencing an unbelievable trauma. I mean, most of us, when you think about dealing with loss, probably one of the most fearful ones, the ones that most of us wouldn't even want to imagine, is the loss of someone we love, much less one of our children. And in this particular case, if you watched the show, and I'm hoping you have, if not, turn this darn thing off and go watch the show. Go check it out on Hulu. There's a clicking mark somewhere here where you can click and go watch it. But if you watch the show, you know that Mandy and Scott had a really, really intense experience. They had the near loss of their daughter, but for Mandy, it was a real loss. When her daughter got into that little go-kart and rammed in the back of that car at full speed and cracked her helmet, split it in half, and was bleeding all over, to this day, she can't hear in her ear. She's deaf in her ear from the process, but at the point there, it wasn't just something like loss of hearing. The big concern was she was dead. There was no breathing, there was no pulse. She was blue and then black. And unfortunately, she survived. But those moments where Mandy felt she lost her daughter, those moments became permanently seared in her nervous system. So much so that instead of saying, oh my God, my daughter made it, she's living every single day trying to make sure she never loses her daughter again. Quite frankly, in the beginning, I almost didn't want to work with this couple because I thought I'd rather deal with a family that has lost their child and show how people are able to deal with that. But I thought, no, might be even better because this is a family where there isn't just the loss of the trauma here, of her being tied up in the trauma, which I know how to help somebody with, and anyone can be helped with, so you know. But also, there's really the loss of a family here. There's the loss of an intimate relationship between her husband and her. And it looked to me as if that loss had happened before the trauma, before there was ever the accident in this situation. So I wanted to get under deeper. And then when I saw grandma had moved in, I said, well, there's the loss of privacy. No matter how great grandma is, there's the loss of intimacy. There are all these losses that were stacking. And I thought, you know what? All of us have to deal with loss, so let's deal with it. Let's uncover the truth with this family. And maybe by looking at somebody else and we see what the truth is, what they present as the problem to themselves and each other is different than the truth. Maybe we can look at our own lives in the same way. And that's why we made this particular show. So Mandy and Scott, how to turn them around for me was pretty simple. It was like I knew I could take Mandy and I could do a trauma cure or a phobia cure. And there are many people that can do this. I'm not the only one today. My partner and I, Chloe Madonis, together we've trained over 100,000 therapists around the world. And being able to take post-traumatic stress or take people that have gone through a significant trauma or panic attacks, whatever label you want to give, human beings can get over it when they have a reason to. When you have a reason to let go of it, because if you don't, it's going to cost you something you love. Right now, the problem is when we get a loss, when we get a problem, what many of us do is we lose one thing, but we gain something else. Mandy gained the ability to get everybody's attention. Her husband, prior to the situation, didn't respond to her. Prior to the situation, their relationship was in a tough place, and so he would do his thing. But now she goes in a panic attack and he comes running. Now she goes in a panic attack and her mother comes running. And so people very often, without realizing it, will reinforce negative behaviors. It's not like Mandy was doing this consciously. It wasn't like she was trying to figure out how to get attention. It's just when she had a real trauma, her brain learned, look at this, I get love from everywhere. I get attention from everywhere. I wasn't getting that before. So at some unconscious level, we lock into how to meet our needs. And that's why a lot of people hang on to their problems and they can't get over it. But almost all of us have something we value more than our pain. We value more than our problems. And I needed to find out what that was. And I believed, I guessed in advance, that the love of these children for Mandy, that if she really got associated to the pain and problems she was creating by trapping them and creating them a world where they couldn't go outside, they couldn't play, they couldn't be kids again, that might get her attention. I thought maybe seeing she's about to lose her husband because he's about to divorce her, that if she could see that a change could happen there, that she could win, that things would change. So I brought them and I did what I would normally do. First step, get them out of the environment where they're trapped, just to get them a fresh thinking process without all the triggers of what was going on in that little house. And we brought them to Fiji. And then I'd only invited Scott and Mandy, but Rita literally showed up. That was truly a surprise for us. The story behind the story is she just decided her daughter was not going without her, and she convinced her daughter at that stage, you can't live without me and you need the kids here. And so they just showed up. So I had suddenly had a new plan, which was I had to figure out how to deal with what's really going on with all these people. I mean, think of it this way. If you really want to change your life, you got to uncover the truth. To uncover the truth, you've got to hear what's not being said. Communication is really about hearing what's not being said. It's the unspokens that influence us the most. And so my first task was to take, Mandy and Scott, pull them aside, separate from everyone else, and make sure that I got underneath what was really going on. And I got finally Scott to see that Mandy was just crying out to him to say, love me, show me you love me even if I'm crazy, show me you love me even if I'm traumatized, show me you love me even if I blame you. I needed Mandy to get the reality that she was blaming Scott for this accident when in fact he had nothing to do with it. She was really blaming herself because she thought she should have done more. She should have anticipated. She should not have let her daughter get in, to that front seat first. And so she couldn't beat herself up anymore. Now she's beating Scott up because he was safe. When these two started to understand this, and I believe we'll have here as one of our videos, kind of that intervention where Scott begins to realize he can get through to her. And she realizes he really does love her. And that we start to get underneath the real communication. The real truth is there is a trauma here, but the deeper fear, the deeper trauma is that love has been lost. And we start to heal that in that first session. There is a breakthrough between them. And you see them crying, holding each other, loving each other. It's giant because they hadn't had any feeling for each other. The story behind the story, though, is this. I knew that was only the first step. I knew that keep this going, you have to stack breakthroughs. Otherwise, people forget. And so I thought the next thing to do is not to work and give more feedback really to Mandy, but what I really need to do is make Scott stronger so that whenever Mandy does, he will be in his center and he can be there for her. So I took him skydiving. Didn't end up in the show because we had to get and squeeze everything into 44 minutes. And so you don't get to see the fact that she's on the sideline and he goes skydiving, and you see this incredible excitement show up in her when she sees him just taking the world. Taking something you're so afraid of and just doing it anyway. There's a great scene that I'll never forget, didn't make the cut, hopefully it'll be on our clips here. And it's a time in which Scott has just finished skydiving and his little daughter and his little son, right, Austin and Cody are looking up at him like this with this incredible awe in their eyes. Their dad did this. And she's looking at him, holding his arm, and she has this total attraction for him again because it's like reigniting a relationship requires polarity. It requires that men and women are in their core energies. If a person is masculine, they gotta be in that energy. If they're feminine, they gotta be in that energy for us to have that attraction, and you see it happen with them. So now what's great, this couple knows they love each other, they know what's really going on, they know the truth. The trauma's still there, I'm gonna deal with the trauma, but we're starting to deal with a deeper truth. And then of course I gotta deal with grandma, because grandma, the truth for grandma, she loves both these guys, but she's alone without her kids. She wants the grandkids, she wants that love. And as Rita would tell you, and I really respect the heck out of her because it took gigantic growth. Most people can't be that honest with themselves. She was keeping Mandy close with her weaknesses because that made her feel needed. And she was supplementing through her daughter because she had not had great relationships with men. So we had that little altercation on the beach, but it was an altercation that brought she and I closer. And Rita and I became partners to turn this around. And Rita had guts. I mean, she was willing for her daughter to let go. And I told her, I said, your daughter's gonna have to go on her own and go on this journey without you. And we'll let the kids go because I need her to see the kids are not glass, that they're not so breakable. They're gonna be on this scary adventure and they're gonna be on it with them. And eventually we're gonna take the kids away and these two are gonna be on their own. Rita really was fantastic, really fantastic. So she became my partner. So that's kind of the story behind the story, Rita's growth, their growth. And then of course, when I took them on this tour, what they didn't know is I knew that any behavior like this behavior of being traumatic and getting attention, I don't care who's done it. You and I have done it. We've all been brats at times. And I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that even after she was closer to her husband and even after all this had happened, that if I put, Mandy back in a stressful situation, those old behaviors of, kind of being bitchy and complaining and making Scott wrong and attacking him would show up again. So it was a test at two levels. Could Scott take it and keep his center? which he did an unbelievable job of doing? And secondly, could Mandy start to recognize her own pattern and how ugly it was? Because again, I don't know anybody, you, I, or anybody else that doesn't have some behavioral patterns at times that get triggered, that we'd hope the camera wasn't running looking at us, right? Because we all got them, I don't care who you are. And Mandy was willing to face this and deal with it, and something was gonna be on primetime television. And I made arrangements though to break her pattern. As I usually do, I try to find somebody who's got a bigger challenge. And I made sure that the person who was taking him on this wilderness adventure was a man who had his own story. And his name is Craig DiMartino. And Craig's a guy that's like a light, a total light. He's a man who is now one of the best, mountain climbers in the world, but he fell from 100 feet and crushed his legs and lost one of his legs. And so he's walking, carrying her gear while she complains, carrying her daughter on his back. And at the end of the day, at the right time, sure enough, he sits her down to talk to her, and he takes off his leg and talks about the problems he has with his nerves and the pain that he has. And for a moment, you see this opening, Mandy, but it didn't last. In fact, I told Craig, I said, you got to drop these guys out in the middle of nowhere. And I said, they're going to have to find their way back. Now, I want to be smart. The story behind the story is, I said, I want to make sure along the way that, Scott's in a position where he knows how to use a map, he knows where he is. He doesn't know he's going to get out, but he knows how to read maps. He's following and he's paying attention to where he is. But then we're going to just have you leave. And they're going to be in the middle of nowhere, and they're going to have to find their way back. So we did that. If you saw the show, you saw the pieces of this. But what was amazing is, Craig called me up and he said, Tony, I failed you. I said, what are you talking about? He said, Mandy's got a great heart of her inside, a great person, but she said she is so negative, she is so demanding, she is so harsh with Scott and how he does it. The kids are great, Scott's great, I know there's a great woman in there, but I got her for a few minutes and she didn't stick. And I said, Craig, you're undervaluing yourself. She values you, she respects you. We just need to jolt her one more time. And so I said, I need you to write this letter. And so I got him to write the letter, just saying what he'd said to me on the phone, but I went and read it in front of everybody, her kids, her mother, et cetera, in the whole world. And if you watched the show, you saw the shift that it made, because all of us have a place where we'll let go of our patterns, we'll let go of our loss, we'll let go of our angers, we'll let go of our hurts if we see the truth. And in that moment, she saw the truth. And she didn't want everyone to blame her mother, so she said, it's me, I'm responsible, I'm being this way, it's not right. And then, of course, the final step was uncovering the truth about fear. Fear is excitement. Fear has an energy to it. Don't get me wrong. If it's pure fear and you don't deal with it, if you don't dance with the fear, it'll eat you alive. It'll shut you down. But if you take fear as an energy and you figure out how to use it, how to apply it, there's not a lot of difference between fear and pure excitement. There's a very thin difference between fear and excitement. And when finally I got her out there in that final process where she's with her husband and they're out, in the river and they're, kayaking and they're going through the whitewater rapids, and all of a sudden something clicked where all of a sudden her brain said, oh my God, I love this. I love the sense of adrenaline. I love the sense of excitement. I feel alive again. This is the person I really am. And she rediscovered herself. What she uncovered is the truth is she hadn't lost anything. Loss is always an illusion. You can't lose anything if it's real. Nothing real is ever lost. You say, no, Tony, I lost my job. You can't lose what's real, which is your passion for that work. And if it really is your passion, you'll get that job or a better job again. That work, that mission part is still inside you. If it was just a job, you didn't lose anything because you didn't really have anything. That wasn't anything that's real. That was just a skill set, or it was just a filler. When I say real, I mean something you're passionate about. I mean something you care deeply about. You might say, Tony, but I could lose my mom, my brother, my sister. I've lost those people, but I don't experience loss anymore. And the only difference is because the love I have for them can't be lost. The love I know they have for me can't be lost. If you understand and get out of your cognitive side of your head and get into the spirit or soul of yourself, you can't lose that love. You might say, no, but I lost this, I lost that. It's only a loss if you don't use it. You may have, lost some capability, some skill, some ability, but if it really pushes you, loss will lead to gain. It's a temporary loss, so it's not a loss. You might become more courageous because of that loss. You might become stronger. You might start to care more. Am I making sense? You can create in your mind any meaning you want. If you live in a world where loss can happen at any time, you live in a world of fear. And that fear will convert into something ugly. Either it'll be fight or flight. Flight is you run away from everything and then you look weak to yourself and there's no muscle or aliveness in you. And fight is kind of like what you saw happening with Mandy, where it's just like people get angry so they don't feel scared so much. But underneath it, she was just scared. If you really want to have an extraordinary life, the theme of this show is to show you that you can rebuild anything, but what you got to do is find the good in anything. If something, quote, horrific has happened, then something extraordinarily good must have to come from that. Then there's no loss. I know the worst days of my life have turned out to be the best days because I went back and said, how can I use this? They weren't, some of them, for many years, and it's not like I was so smart. But what I found in people's lives is, if you can take what you think is loss and turn it into drive or into a hunger or into a caring, that thing you lost will lead to something much greater. And so net, there's gain, there's greater growth, there's greater love, there's greater expansion of your spirit. I hope I'm not sounding too airy-fairy here, but it's really real. You can feel like you've lost everything, or you can take everything life gives you and see as a step towards gain of a better you, of a greater you, of a deeper you, of a more loving you, of a you that can give more.